Well, it's now time to take out the heater box assembly. I'm going to take this whole thing out. I'm going to disassemble it. I'm going to fix all the broken parts to it, make some modifications to it, and then we're going to reassemble it, and then we'll do a test fit, make sure it fits back, and then I'll ultimately take it back out because I'm restoring this tub and I need it out. But I do want to give credit to people on the forums like JeepForum.com. There's a great thread. It started back in 2010. It's got a lot of progress through the years, and I took a bunch of notes and kind of altered notes based on other subscribers adding to that, whatever. But anyway, what I'm going to do here is kind of the culmination of kind of think best practices, what I learned on that. So I'll put a link to that forum thread down in the bottom of this video. It'll be underneath the video. But most importantly is, this procedure probably applies to all, all CJ5, 7s, and 8s, as well as probably through most of the years. I think 79 and below, there are 78 and below, there's a little bit different heater style, but it's just, minor differences. It's still the same approach. And it actually also might apply to most of the Wranglers. But, just to talk about a couple reasons why you would need to actually drop the box. First would be, there's a heater core in here that runs front to back right in here. And that could spring a leak, break somehow, and for that reason you have to take the box out to replace that heater core. That'd be one reason. Second reason would be something wrong with your motor, whether the motor doesn't run very good, it doesn't run at all, or possibly even the squirrel cage fan that's attached to it, maybe it's got some broken blades. It's made out of plastic, so that could happen. That'd be another reason. Third reason I could think of is there's a seal on the back side of this three-dimensional object is a flat metal plate, and where that plate mounts to this box, there's a seal there. Any water coming through the vent and or coming out, if your your heater core is leaking, all that water goes and it sits down here in the bottom, and as it gets to a certain point, it raises up, and there's actually a vent that vents out to the outside, just drops that liquid out. But it sits here, meanwhile, in that crease, and if that seal is not sealed right, it'll actually leak into the Jeep. And if you got carpet in here, you probably won't notice it. Especially if it's rainwater, you won't. But if it's antifreeze because of this heater core breaking, you might smell antifreeze inside the Jeep, or especially when you turn on the motor, you'd smell. There shouldn't be any smell of antifreeze inside the system because that's a closed system. But anyway, that would be another reason that that'd be a third reason that you'd want to drop this box. And a fourth reason is maybe your linkages aren't working while they're. Maybe some of the doors are messed up. There's a bunch of flapper doors in here that direct the flow of air, and those can get trapped or broken, that type of stuff. And you may have to do that. You'd have to drop this box for that reason as well. But so give me just a minute. I'm going to set up and I'm going to show you starting the steps on how to get this thing out. All right, to begin the removal of this heater box, there's 5 things we kind of want to disconnect. Now you'll notice my dash has been taken off. This was for another purpose. And just to make sure you understand, you do not need to take your dash off to get this box out. People are doing it without taking their dash off. I think one of the things that said made it easier if they actually removed their passenger seat. So that might help you out, but the dash does not need to come out. But with the dash off, I can actually show you and point to things that need to be taken out. There's 5 things that you want to disconnect. First is this, it's an electrical connection to this. There's a resistor, set of resistors behind this panel. You want to pull this off. Mine was pretty stuck. I had to wiggle it pretty good to get that off. Next is on your dash, there's the 3 different levers that you pull to adjust all your heating and your airflow instrumentation. And those all have cables on them, and they come to 3 different areas. One is right here. There's a little hat on the top of this that you got to pull off, and then you can pull the cable off of this post. And then there's a section right here where you can pull that, the end of the cable stay, you pull that off, and that cable comes loose. So you'll need to do that at this location, and then right over here at this location. Those 3 different cables need to be disconnected. And then finally, this is your defrost vent. You'll need to take apart. I'll just pop this kind of loose. Now this will kind of come off. I want to be able to disconnect this guy here from this lower box. So those are the items you're going to need to take care of, reaching up underneath your dash. Get those things disconnected and you'll have that part done. Alright, moving under the hood, we're going to remove the battery and the battery tray to start making access to all this stuff a lot easier. The important things on this side of the firewall include this drain tube. This needs to be disconnected. This actually attaches to the upper section of the heater box in here. I'll be removing that in mine. For the lower box, I don't think you have to remove the upper portion. So I need to remove this. The other two things is there's two heater lines that go into that heater core, and these will need to be removed. We'll pull those off. Next we have the actual electrical connection to the blower motor. This is the blower motor, and it actually is attached to the box, so this is going to pull through the firewall. And then finally we have the bolts. There's 4 bolts that hold that lower box in place. Here's one, here's a second one down here, a third one here, and a fourth one is way back here on the very center of the firewall. And we'll take those nuts off. We'll take those nuts off last. So I want to get all the rest of this stuff disconnected so we can get to those nuts. Okay, so we got all the firewall items removed. I've got everything removed except for this last nut. I've left that on. But there was one other thing that I forgot to mention. This is a little drain extension, and it's where the drain pokes through the firewall just beneath the blower motor at that lowest part on the lower heater box. There's a drain port, and it comes through the firewall, and then this just attaches to it to redirect that liquid or moisture, away from the Jeep and I guess down on the ground. Anyway, it's a simple thing. You just take the clamp off and wiggle that off. That comes off. So let's take off this last nut, and then we'll need to move to the cowl and take off that cowl vent. Will be the next thing. Okay, so everything is loose. It's ready to come out. If I was wanting to just drop the bottom portion, I would have to disconnect the cable that operates this passenger side vent flapper. I'd have to come over and disconnect that because this cable is the only thing that kind of ties these things together. I'm going to pull the whole thing out as an assembly. So actually what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove this. Just to kind of simulate, and ultimately that could come out too. We'll try and do without that. I will pull that out in a minute. Let's see if we can get this thing. It's going to get hung up a little bit on that. Remember that blower motor sticking through? There's got a bunch of crud on it. It's got to come through that hole. Again, get this whole thing out. I need to remove this. Let's get that piece out of there. Again, this cable is the only thing kind of holding these two things together. That thing would come out separately. Well, there it is. Here's one last look at this whole thing as it sits in the Jeep, because I wanted to circle back to the fact that probably most people are going to want to just drop this lower section. Your heater core is in this lower section, the blower motor is on the back side of this. You can service those items by just removing the lower piece. If you're going to do that, you're still going to need to disconnect these control cables that are down on the lower box. You would not need to disconnect the control cable that connects to this top centerpiece, but you are going to need to disconnect this side cable, and then this just all you after you disconnect the side cable, just lift this up about a ½ inch. This whole lower part should be able to pull out and down. You got to remember the blower motor sticks through the firewall about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, as well as the two tubes that come to the heater core. So it's going to come out quite a bit, but it's out and down, I think, to get that out. So that's that. I am going to now disconnect this side because I do want to separate these two, and then we're going to start looking at them independently and kind of make decisions. And so let's get this disconnected so we can get this thing taken apart. On this old CJ heater box, there's 4 cable connections. They're all very similar. And I've seen the ones on the Wranglers. They're relatively similar, but just a little bit different. But the concept's the same. You got this cable sleeve that's held in place by this little clip. You got the cable itself that goes around a stud, and you got this little retainer. It's a push nut. And so the first thing we're going to do is take that push nut off. Just by grabbing and taking it off. You can do that, or you can get a couple screwdrivers behind it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and take this. Let's go ahead and pull that cable off the end of that, and I'm going to use a screwdriver. I'm going to pull this out of that connection. So that's all it takes to get that connection. And again, there's 4 of them. They all work about the same. Okay, just focusing on this top section. Obviously, it just needs to be cleaned. I'm not going to paint this. You can't see this at all. It's really 2 big plastic pieces that are riveted together, kind of a funky looking rivet. If you needed to, you could take it apart. I don't see any reason why you'd ever need to take that apart. All of this upper part is controlled by this device right here, and this goes straight. That cap nut right there is one of those. Here's one of these clips that holds a control cable that goes to the dash, and it basically pushes and pulls this. This whole thing controls ultimately a gate valve over here that's down inside, as well as there's one right in here. And then it extends using this cable to go to that other passenger side floor vent as well. All right, before we start taking this apart and looking more at these flaps and see what needs to be placed on them, I want to check the functionality of this device. Here's where the control cable connects to this point right here. And this goes to, on the Jeep, there's a push-pull mechanism. It's called air, and it's got either closed, heat, or vent. And this is closed. If you move it to this middle position, it's heat, and then you move over here, it's vent. And just to check the operation from closed to the first position, this seems to work pretty good. And then that click right there is kind of possibly the issue. So I know at least this thing pivots right, and then from here to there, that's kind of stiff. And I remember that being stiff all along. And I don't know if the stiffness, again, it operates this mechanism. It either goes through this hard line here, opening that valve on that side, or this cable driven going to the passenger side. I want to take this apart right here and just check the functionality from here this way, and then also be able to push and pull this cable that way just to see if one of these 2 is causing an issue, or it might even be the actual gate valve itself. So let me get this part right here taken off. Okay, so with this now disconnected and the cable disconnected, I can see really easily that this cable, it works without any type of restriction at all. But this one, it's where the initial, and it's actually over here in this gate. So we look at this thing really closely. Here's this gate valve I was telling you about. This allows fresh air to go to the driver's side. It's a hard piece of metal, but it's got a rubber thing around it, and the rubber thing actually looks like it's in good condition, and it creates a good seal. So that's something I may or may not actually even change. We are going to take it out, but to check the operation, here's this lever. If I pull this lever, it's hard right there. It freely moves. It's just that when it first opens, if you look right back there, it's actually folding. It's got to fold backwards before it lets go. That's exactly why it's stiff. And I think really logically on these things, if this thing had a little bit of leak in it, it wouldn't really bother anything. I think what I'm going to do is I might just try trimming that edge to get rid of that obstruction. And I'm going to take this out to inspect it, but it's in such good condition. The big question is, if I didn't change this, would it last another 20 years, 40 years? And realistically, it's not dry rotted. It's pliable. I probably will not swap out this, kind of a rubber gasket, almost like a consumable. But I do want to trim that edge right there. So I'm going to take this out. And the way you take this out, it's got a pivot rod right here. On the back side, it appears there's another one of those push nuts. If I pull that out, this whole assembly, and disconnect some of this push rod should come out. I should go get that thing out. Let's do that. Okay, so after taking that push nut off this end, I was able to pull this out and then remove this flap. Interesting, I was trying to figure out how is this kind of thing kind of clocked. This rod actually has a flat spot on the back side, and that flat spot goes against the flap. That's how it gets basically clogged. But that piece came out. Again, this this is in really good shape. It's molded onto this piece of metal. You could obviously cut this off. You could add something else to it. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with this. I'm not going to change this on mine. This will go another long time. Probably clean it up, maybe spray it with some rust prohibitor or something like that. Just kind of clean it up. But I'm just going to trim this edge just a little bit, and then we'll solve that problem of it being a little bit tough to activate. But let's do that. We're going to move on to the center section. Okay, one thing, I also want to test this again with these cables, these things not attached, see how smoothly this operates. And, you know, from closed position to what's called heat, that worked good. And then right there, it's kind of stuck. These parts are, they're a corrosion resistant type thing, but they got like oxidation on them. And I'm wondering if I just got, there's a little lip right there. We're going to take all these pieces apart because I do want to pull out this rod to get this gate out of there to inspect it. So let's take this apart, and then I'm going to smooth all these things out. Might put a little bit of lube on this outside here and make sure it works. But before I do that, I'm actually going to take some pictures of it to make sure I got where all these a lot of washers down in there. Going to make sure we get those back where they belong. So if we take a few pictures here of how that went. Again, it's held on. This is actually like, instead of a push nut, it's like a push cap. I'm not sure what they call it, but it's got a hat. It's like a hat. But there's a push nut there as well, and I think just those two items is what holds the front end together in this spring. And on the back side over here, there's going to be another push nut holding this rod that goes right through there. But there's a bunch of washers here. Just want to capture those. There's one back there. Okay, let's get this thing put apart. So after quite a bit of persuasion and a few choice words, I was finally able to get this piece out. It has some, you know, just corrosion on this piece, so it doesn't want to slide out from the gate. But it basically comes out this way after you pull the push nut off the end of that. This is fine. I'll clean this up, so it'll go back on. It again has a flat spot right here, so that'll clock it to this gate, and it's rounded on the back side. And then as far as this gate, it's got just, you know, surface rust. Then I'll put some rust prohibitor on that, clean that up. But this rubber gasket, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's still pliable. There's no cracks in it. The big question, you know, would it last another 20, 30 years? And I think the answer is yes. There's no reason for me to, in my case, to try and change this. I know people are taking this off, and there's some, you know, 1-inch wide weather stripping you buy, hardware stores and stuff like that you do. I just don't know if theirs is going to adhere as well as how this thing's molded on there. So I'm going to get all this kind of cleaned up, and then we're going to kind of try and put this stuff back together and see if we can make this work. Alright, I got this whole thing kind of cleaned up with soap and water just to make it look a little nicer. I did paint this. I didn't paint this area because this is where that stuff slides. I just didn't want to create any extra piece. But I did polish it off with steel wool, maybe a little bit of sandpaper. And then I started working all the pieces. Like we got this flap, we got it sanded down and some rust encapsulator on it, both sides. I got the rubber cleaned off with just soap and water. Remember I talked about cutting off a little sliver? There's the little sliver I cut off to make it fit. I did actually put this back in just to see if it wasn't adjusted right, and it just still was acting the way it was. So I did trim that off. I went ahead and painted this, but like things like this right here, where this has got to slide onto that. A little bit of sandpaper and also some steel wool made that, you know, polished it really up really nice. So now it slides back on there really nice. We got that, and then over on this side, we got all this stuff. Everything that needs to slide together, polished with steel wool, so this will slide really good, as well as things like this. It had a little ridge on here. I think they stamped this out when it's made. I think based on the back side. I took a file after it and just kind of smoothed all this out, so this stuff should rub together a little better now. Same thing on this guy with sandpaper and steel wool on this, so this will slide on that piece really well. I did have to figure out I'm glad I took some pictures. You know, this could actually go this way or it could go this way, but based on the curve of this thing, I realized, and the position of this, that I've got this set up just the way it needs to go. So I think we're gonna start putting this stuff back together. All right, so with all that cleaned up, and again with that piece trimmed over there, this thing, it still has a perfect seal over there, but it doesn't get hung up like it did before. So that's gonna improve the operation of that. I'm very happy with that. Now let's try and get this center section all put together. Give it a whirl. That works better. That works better. It's a little stuck right there. But I think what it is this stuff is just too loose in and out, and it'll tighten up when I get this other control cable back underneath this hat. It'll keep all this stuff tight, and then it'll work better. Yeah, it just needs to be all tightened up with that hat. So that finishes that, and really kind of finishes this whole top end. I've got this now all restored, and I think we'll now move to the actual heater box. All right, it's time to tackle the heater box. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something you can actually take out without removing all that fresh air piece. This can come out separately. We can service this separately. It's got the heater core in it and the blower motor, probably the two major pieces you're gonna want to remove this for, plus a seal in the back. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we take this apart, I want to make some general observations. And it really belongs on the back side. You know, the whole front side is basically this hard plastic, and it's got relatively a flat surface on the back. And the flat surface is covered by this piece of metal. And the observation I want to make, remember there's 4 mounting bolts. There's one here, one here, one here, and one way down here. And the key is this metal surface basically mimics the inside texture or surface of the firewall. But yet this is not mounted completely against the firewall. They actually have these what's called a standoff. And this is supposed to be kind of a little bit softer rubber, kind of like a rubbering isolator. And you know, these are pretty stiff, so we are going to replace these. But the key is this whole box does stand off the firewall a little bit. And the whole gist of a lot of this stuff is the fact that we need to know this measurement. And all these this is a spongy gasket. There's a spongy gasket here, and there's one you probably can't see from there, but here this is the drain for this lower section. You know, it's got a gasket, and that's it for this piece. You know, these gaskets need to be compressed between this unit and the firewall. And each one, you know, this has a little raised up area, so this gasket is a little bit thinner. This one doesn't have any kind of raised up area, so this one's a little bit taller, thicker, and this one here. And what I noticed is we got, you know, this one's 3/4 of an inch, this one's a 1/2 inch, and I believe this one's a 1/2 inch. And, you know, all that's divisible by 1/4 inch. So what I ended up doing is I went and bought on Craigslist, and I'm sorry, on Amazon, I bought this piece of Neoprene foam. It's a 1/4 inch. And I'll be able to make, if I put 2 thicknesses, I'll be able to make this, 2 thicknesses here and 3 thicknesses. we don't make that. So I'm going to take this stuff, put it together, I'm going to glue it together, and then I'll cut out those shapes, and then I'll have the thickness and the shape that I need to create this. You know, this motor, I'm not sure what the dimension here is, but the hole in the firewall that this pokes through is probably a 1/4 inch bigger than that. And this basically creates the seal so that water from the engine bay. You know, these old Jeeps, they don't have those belly pans underneath the engine that keeps a lot of the moisture and rainwater and that type of stuff out of the engine bay. Engine bay gets a lot of water in it. Plus, when you're going off-roading, you get a lot of mud and dirt. So, you know, this is just creating that final seal so that this can poke through the firewall, but not allow water to get into the Jeep. Even here, you're going to have a couple holes in the firewall for this, and this is just basically a nice seal is all we're trying to do there. So again, I'm going to use this 1/4 inch stuff. We're going to just multiple plies of this to create the correct thickness, and then we'll be able to hand make those gaskets, get those ready. And then for these standoffs, I actually found, I believe I got this, you know, a hardware store will have these rubber bumpers. You know, it's a spongy rubber. This is, I believe this was 3/8 of an inch thick, and that's exactly what these are. And in this little pack there's 4 of them. I think this was like $3 or $4. So we're going to actually replace these with these, and that way we'll have our standoffs will be correct. But I think what we're going to start with is I'm going to go ahead and start just disassembling this. We'll take the blower motor, which has the fan, squirrel cage fan on the other end of it. We can take this front section here off, and then ultimately I want to get this plate off so I can see this the heater core. I am going to replace the motor and the heater core definitely, and then we're going to reseal this box up as well as sand this down and give this a better paint job just so it stops rusting. So let's start taking this apart. That's interesting. I was wondering if this would be brittle or in bad shape or missing, you know, it wasn't blowing very well, so it's maybe missing some fins, but it seems like it's in really great shape. So probably just swap this over to the new motor. So that's that. Get this guy here to take off. Okay, so let's just talk about what we just found. Bunch of debris. We've got a gate over here. The gate over here basically controls whether or not air is going up into your defroster. There's an internal gate here, which I believe they call this is the temperature mixer gate. And there's a cable internally here that goes over, and it goes to the end of the box over here. This is one of the cables that we removed earlier. But this basically, by opening and closing this, allows either air to come past your heater core or not. And we got basically the squirrel cage area here that allows that sucking air in and blowing it this direction. So again, I'm going to just continue to kind of take some of this stuff apart. This is what you're going to find ultimately when you take this stuff apart. So we'll have a lot of that as well. The heater core It was held in basically by those 2 screws you saw me take out. They're a little bit on the larger side. Looks like an old copper heater core, but I can see some damage, where some water was leaking there. You know, this is 40 years old. This is not going back in the Jeep. You'd be stretching your luck if you did that. I've already actually purchased the replacement of that. We'll bring that out here in a little bit. But notice that it does have some sponge going around it to kind of help nestle it into this area. So we'll replace that with that neoprene that I've already bought. That'll have multi-use. And but ultimately start taking more of this apart. Okay, so for this temperature mixing gate, there's a stud on this end that pivots on, and there's a stud on the other side. The other side's just got a little piece in the plastic that it sits in. Realistically, this thing just comes out. I'm going to go ahead and pop this loose here with a screwdriver. And now this whole thing. See this? Here's a pivot point here. It goes back and there's a hole there. And then I'm assuming this protrudes through that the metal piece here. And it just pivots up and down based on this. I'm going to get this little push nut off here so I can do that. Just go like that. Cable will come off. So here's our temperature control gate. Piece of metal, pivot point, and basically a full piece of neoprene here. And this, I'll be able to use that 1/4 inch thickness stuff for this as well. So I'll cut out a template of that and we'll get that all fixed up. And then for the gate, for the defroster, again it pivots on the metal sheet as well as goes through the back side. And on the back side is where it's being controlled. So that's all one unit. So really the rod here has to go out the back side. This gate has to come on the front. In fact, let's take, here's a spatial washer. This is where that the corrosion on this piece here basically is going to make it this difficult to get off. Well, that was fun. I learned some more choice words. I ended up having to use like a little punch here. It's actually a little bit, Torx bit, and punch this guy from the end. Just slowly punch it down through there and get it to poke out the back side. But I am going to take a picture of this because there's a certain way this kind of goes together. You got the lever arm here, you got the rod here. There's basically a plastic bushing on the end that goes through this hole that's right there. And then and then on the inside of the box is this washer, and then it goes through this blade gate, and then another washer on the inside, and then once you put the that back metal piece on there, then there's this push nut again. So I'm going to take just a picture of this order just so I have it for reference. Okay. And again, I just really took this out to dress this metal piece up as well as replace. It doesn't have any kind of neoprene or anything down here on this bottom part of the blade, but basically this top part we'll replace these two. This is a sponge rubber. It's actually open cell, which I'm surprised they have open cell in here because that'll attract moisture and all kinds of bad bacteria and that type of stuff. So we're gonna get that out of there. And the final part of disassembly is we need to get this gate out. Again, it's got that open cell foam around the edges, and it's going to be easier just to service this getting it off. Got a spring here that we can take off. But in order to get this off, again, it's going to be all that corrosion on the thing. This rod has got to come out this direction, and it's going to be easy if I go ahead and just take this whole little section here off. It's a bunch of Phillips head screws. Okay. So the same thing, it's got the rod in there, it's got the flat spot on it, so it's clocked. And it operates fine. We just want to get that some new neoprene here, get this metal part serviced. And then first thing I'm going to do, just so you know what I did on that last one also, I'm going to get in here, I'm just going to hand sand as much of this as I can. I want to smooth part of this rod that I can see, just so as it finally gets underneath this piece, it's going to help it get out. So we'll start there. Let me do this. Yeah, pre-sanding that rod just in those little spots, that was the ticket. That really helped get this one out easier. And for reference, again, this one's got a plastic bushing that goes in a larger hole in the side of the piece that it's being attached to. You got the rod that goes through the gate. It's got a flat spot on it, so it's clocked. Another plastic bushing, and then finally a push nut there. And you got the spring. So I'm going to just make a real quick picture of all that assembly. Okay, and then that'd be ready to service. You know, this gate, again, it's a piece of metal, and it's got just the perimeter. And this is where I know some people are going and just getting a 1-inch wide. It comes in a roll, and it'll be pretty cheap. 1-inch wide stripping, you can put it on here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you had straight pieces, whether you do it with straight pieces and got a little gap here, it doesn't matter. Whether you go and buy something and you make actually a piece out of this, again, I've got that 1/4-inch stuff that I'll be able to cut. Something looks just like this, but again, it doesn't really matter. What's going to matter is the fact that it's a little bit flexible there, so it creates a little bit of a seal. But also, when this gate comes closed, that it fully closes and it's not too thick, prohibiting it from closing. Again, this is open cell stuff. I can't believe they use that here, but and you know what? That really completes the disassembly of the whole heater box. All the pieces are gone. We just got to service them, clean them up, put new gaskets and seals. Get things ready to kind of put back together. That took maybe all of 12 minutes. So it's actually very easy. Once you get it out, it's kind of easy to service. But anyway, let's get all these pieces cleaned up. I'll show you what they look like after I get them in better shape, and then we'll start reassembling. Check out how this stuff turned out. Real pleased with it all. Everything cleaned up really nice, painted it. It's ready to go. All these components basically shined up. It's real smooth now. That'll install really nice. All these linkages are sanded and painted for long term, as well as the foam. I did use that 1-inch Neoprene Foam. In fact, here's this was a 55-inch. It's supposed to be 12 inches by 55. It's more than 12 inches wide, but 55 inches long. I got quite a bit left over. This whole roll was only $13. I know there was other people in that thing. They were spending $50 for foam, and I don't know. Anyway, this seems to be a pretty good product. It does cut with cuts with a regular sharp knife. I've also used spade bit to cut some of the holes, as well as a scroll saw or even a knife to cut the outer surfaces of some of these funky shapes, and as well as a hole saw, something similar to that. And nothing really like tore it up and made it look bad, so you can almost cut it with anything. But the whole process started, I actually picked up this piece to start with. I thought this was an easy pattern to kind of draw out, take a measurement. I measured all of the old padding before I took it off. I didn't want to just, as I'm taking it off, destroy it and then not be able to reproduce it. So everything I basically took and drew it out, measured it out, and then specifically this one pointed out immediately that not only you got to get the shape right, but you got to get the offset. I had to basically measure all these offsets and note what they are, because it's got to go back. You could get this shape right, but if you glue that to this panel incorrectly, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. So so ultimately what I did is, very first thing I did with all these three pieces is, and more, there was another piece somewhere, basically all the other pieces up here, I basically took and just sketched them all out. Determine what the size were, what the offset was. I needed to document that before I start taking that stuff off. After doing this, I decided the easiest way to cut the new neoprene was to actually create a 100% size template, and that would make cutting these out easier. So I went into the computer, and I use Visio. I've used Visio for 20-something years before even Microsoft bought it. But anyway, I made these life-size templates, and it includes the offset of what the offset needs to be. But you can cut these out. I cut this out and then applied it to the with some double stick tape to the foam and was able to cut it out pretty easily. Got all these gaskets and the gates and that type of stuff. So anyway, this is a 3-page document. I'm going to put it as a PDF where you can download this and print it to your printer, and you would then have these templates as well. All you would need to do is, after you print it, is just double check that the measurement's right, just to make sure it printed 100%, and you're going to be in good shape. The other thing that I did is, all while I was doing research on this heater box, I took notes. And what happened is, 10 years ago there was one solution, and 2 years later there's a better piece, and a couple years later, but I kept taking notes as what people were using, and so I've got listed here, like the blower motor, I got 3 or 4 different options. I did highlight the one in green as the one I actually ended up going with. The blower motor is only $20. The heater core is only $18. I mean, you can't just not replace that type of stuff. But anyway, this lists all the things that I'm using in this project. Highlighted in green are the items that I chose, but I've also given what others have used in the past, and you're welcome to use this and come up with your own as well. I'm actually going to put all these together as one PDF, and you'll be able to download this. At the bottom of this video, there's a Show More button you can click on on YouTube, and there'll be a link to this document. I'll also probably put it in the first comment, as well as I'll try and paste it anywhere. Anywhere you see the document, what I'll be talking about is this is a CJ7 heater box repair parts list, and I'll somehow add something about the diagrams. But you can download this and do whatever you want to with it. It doesn't matter to me. But I use this and just cut these out and use these to cut my parts out. As far as gluing this stuff, in the event where I wanted to have a thickness, this is 3/4 inch thick. This is 3 of those quarters. Before I cut this out, I actually took some blanks that were a little bit bigger, and I used just spray trim adhesive. You can get this at automotive store, and online, wherever you want, however you prefer to shop. And you don't have to use this brand. Just any brand of spray trim adhesive. One thing I did do is I took some sample pieces and I just glued them together just to make sure this stuff didn't melt or have an adverse effect of the rubber itself. And it's just strong. It's just completely strong, unbelievably strong. And then as far as gluing the rubber to the metal, I wanted something that I could kind of move around a little bit to get this place. So I didn't want to use this. I didn't really think that was strong enough, but it really is. I ended up going with, this is called Loctite 60-minute glue. This is just like super glue, and it's like a gel. So it does give you some, you can actually move it around, you can clamp it in place and that type of stuff. So I use this, but you can use any kind of a super glue type gel. I would definitely put some glue on it, make sure it doesn't melt or anything, any product, foam product you use. But this ain't coming, this is just strong, it's just not coming off. So these are all, that's how I did all these parts. Here's some of the rings. How they will go. This is all just items that that we're going to use to put all this stuff back. The next thing I'm going to tackle is cleaning up that metal backing plate. I'm going to get it all sanded down and repainted and get it prepped for reinstallation. Check out how this turned out. Pretty easy to do. It was 150 grit sanding paper on a little electric orbital sander. Got it down to bare metal except for a few spots there was a little bit of rust, so instead of going with like a metal primer and then some black paint, I ended up going with Eastwood's. They have that rust encapsulator, 2 coats of that, and this thing looks just perfect. So this thing is now ready. It's ready for install. In fact, I think I've got all the parts now ready for install, and where I'm going to start is start getting these gates in, and I'm going to start actually down here. Let me show you, actually flip this over. This is how this thing's installed, typically. Here's the lower passenger floor side, here's the defrost vent, here's the heater vent like that. But we're going to flip this thing over just to make it a little bit easier, just so you have an orientation on how this thing looks. But remember, I got all these pieces still put together, and let me take off this push nut. Okay, so we want to put this bushing in here first. And then we're going to put this washer. Kind of on a flat spot, it's almost straight down. Okay. Alright, what I'm going to do, that worked out well. What I don't know is where this pivot point is, and it's on that back sheet, so let me get that put back on here. This piece will install like this. Man, that works perfect. Alright, so that one's good. Now let's move over to this this guy. Now before I install that, I'm going to install this cable. Goes in like this in that direction. Okay, this gate, it's got the built-in rod, so it's not something we're going to push in from either side. You just take this rod and you got to put it in this upper position, and it's basically this flat piece is going to hold this side of it, and this is basically go from this upper position to this position. It's just going to toggle between these two, either direct air around the heater core, or if it goes up like that, it's going to push air through the heater core. So I'm just going to do that, and then I really need to take this. Let's pull this. Clip this back up in here. All right. That's going to hold that. It's going to have to be final fitted after we get the other piece in, and then the next piece is going to be on this side. Getting back kind of our normal situation. Okay, so the last gate is going to go for the passenger lower fresh air vent, which is a little unit that actually sits on here. This guy here will mount onto there. We're going to install that gate actually into this thing first. And here's that gate. I did, after gluing this on, I did do a test fit, and it was a little bit tight, so I just used some scissors and was able to trim this down, and it fits really nice now. So we're going to drop that in. On this lever, we've got a metal washer and then this plastic bushing. It's going to get installed like this. And on the other side, we're going to have another plastic bushing. Push nut. Okay, so let me tell you about that push nut. That went on a little bit too easy, so I'm going to adjust that push nut. Watch. Let's take it back off. Alright, the way these push nuts work is on the inside there's a bunch of little slits, and then it's raised. And the only way, and if it gets raised too much, it sits too loose. So all I got to do is take a hammer and flatten that piece a little bit, and it'll tighten it up. Yeah, now that's a lot tighter now. So let's test how this thing works. Alright, we're still a little bit tight. I'm going to have to take out a little more of the gasket back here so that this will open. Alright, not a problem. We'll take that back out and make an adjustment. Alright, with a little more trimming on the for adjusting this piece, it now opens up exactly how I want it to. It doesn't need to open any more than that because it'll actually hit this surface here. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually mount this now to this. The originally it had some kind of a putty or something on here, and so I kind of took that as something to do some research. And what I ended up finding is this is butyl tape. This is kind of like the tape they it's like putty, but it's 1/16 inch thick and it's 1/2 inch wide. This is what they use on campers when you're going to mount a window or a door. You use butyl tape to create a seal. It's actually, it never really kind of hardens. It stays kind of this putty, but that's going to create a nice little surface or interference between these two pieces to create a little bit of a airtight piece. But anyway, I'm going to get some of this installed on here, and then we're going to get that screwed on there. All right, here's a quick look at what it looks like with that the butyl tape installed. Goes on super easy, just kind of tacks on there. And now this is ready to be basically screwed onto here. And so let me take a quick second to get that done. Let's take a look at our first major upgrade. The first upgrade is our radiator core. This is the original radiator core. This is 40 years old. It's made out of copper. It's quite heavy. It does have this foam going around it to create the seal between it and the casing, so air flows through it. Here's the upgrade. This is all aluminum, very light. I went ahead and added my neoprene to it to create that seal again. I did have to trim kind of some of these edges back here to get it to fit in there just right. And the only big thing that I've noticed different is the actual angle of these two inlet and outlet tubes. It's just a little bit different when I try and put the back plate on. There's a little bit of interference. I think it's this short one that's the problem, and I don't want to try and bend this stuff out. It'll end up creating a leak, and I just don't want that. What I'm going to end up doing is actually ovaling out the hole in this backing plate and possibly even the firewall if I have to get these to fit in. I'm going to leave these just like they are, and I'm going to adjust the backing plate in the Jeep to accommodate that. But this now just slides right in here. I'm going to get this installed. I'm going to get the backing plate adjusted and have that piece, and then we'll move on to the blower motor. The last thing I do want to do before I do that though is again this outer rim here all needs to get the seal. I'm going to still use this butyl tape for that, and it's going to create that seal. And what I talked about early in this video is from at least from here around to about right here, it's very important that we get a good seal, because any water or liquid that comes out of this, again this is upside down, this thing kind of looks like this in the Jeep. Any water liquid that gets in this unit is going to come down and sit in this little area, and then out of that back there's a drain tube. So we want to create basically a watertight seal here, so that any of that water that gets in here definitely gets redirected out of that drain tube and gets out of the Jeep, not down in the carpet and that type of stuff. So this butyl tape will really help with doing that. I'll put a layer of this around this whole thing, and we'll get that backing plate installed. After opening up these two little holes, I did this one on this side and this one on this side. I was able to get this back on place, got my pivot points protruding out here, all the holes line up, and it's got just a little bit of a gap. So I've made that adjustment for that, and now I'm going to pull this back off, apply my tape, and then get it screwed back on. So let me do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, that putty went on really nice. It's so easy to bend it around corners and stuff. It goes on really nice. I think it's going to give me a good seal. So next we're going to go ahead and just get this guy put back in. And let me get this button down, and then we're going to move on to talk about the motor. Okay, now on to the blower motor. Here's the original. You can actually get a direct replacement. They still make these. They're kind of expensive, maybe 40, 50 bucks. But for some reason, everyone in the forum is actually upgrading to this motor. This is a PM102. It's like in the early mid-70s. This was on a bunch of different cars, so it's very readily available in your auto stores. I got this at AutoZone, and it was only 20 bucks. But it is like a replacement. The biggest difference between these two is the size of this, the diameter of this, and this pokes through the firewall. So while it'll sit outside and poke out here, I'm going to have to measure this and actually cut out my firewall to make a room for this. But everyone's going to this, and they say that this actually spins faster and actually will help move that heat a little more. And I'm going to reuse my old cage, so this will just pop on here. Got to remember to take this little bracket right there off, and we're going to move that over to this motor, and then we'll put this mounted on here. Get that mounted in there, and we'll be able to test fit that. Let's get that done. Alright, the next thing I've got to do is enlarge the hole that's in the firewall so that it'll accommodate this larger motor. This is 3.5 inch diameter for it to fit in here. And the actual hole that's in the firewall right now is 2 7/8. So, and you can buy a 3-inch hole saw, and there's a way to do that. But I actually bought this. I saw the receipt back in 2015, 4 years ago. I think I'm going to use this somewhere on the project, and this is the time to do it. So I'm just going to do it by hand. And so the way I've decided to do it is I went ahead and established a center point on this piece of wood, and I went ahead and drew that existing hole size on the wood. So now I can go and mount this board behind and use this circle here to get it centered, get the wood centered. So now when I get this mounted on there, I'll know what the center point is, and then I'll take that same center point and I'll I'll mark my 3.5 inch hole on the metal itself, and then be able to cut it out with this saw. So let's go get this mounted, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I positioned the board so that circle, that 2 7/8 circle, is centered on my 2 7/8 hole. I screwed through 2 existing holes to mount that board. It's permanently mounted. Now, if you decided to go with a 3.5 inch hole saw, this would still be the approach, I think, and then you're going to put your center bit in on the center, and you'll end up cutting a nice hole that's concentric with the old hole. What I'm going to do is take my protractor, and I'm going to use that same center point. Now that I've found the center point, I'm going to scribe my 3.5 inch hole here so I can cut it out with my jigsaw. Hey, it fits right back in there. All the 4 mounting studs are actually protruding through the wall. So that right there is it. It actually fits. We got one more big thing we got to do, and that is where the fresh air box connects down in here. There's a gasket right there. We got to make that gasket, and I'll tell you how I'm going to do that is I'm going to make it oversized, and I'm going to make it fit perfect to the fresh air piece. We're going to mount the fresh air piece, then we're going to mount this piece. We're going to mark where it goes, and then I'm going to cut it out and glue it to this piece where the fresh air piece just dumps into it. Okay, so I just took an oversized piece of my neoprene, cut it out, set it up here, and traced around the oval so I had an exact match. And so now this is my template. Again, it's not exact on the outside, but on the inside it's going to be a good match. I'm going to stick that up in there, because that's where we'll need that. And then I've taken my heater box, And I've installed all of the bushings. Here's the white spacers, as well as all the bushings that are around all these different components, because I want the correct standoff when I marry these two together. Okay, so the fresh air box is held by 2 screws over here. So that's in the right place. This box now got 2 screws on it, so it's in the right spot as well. Just going to take a marker and mark where this goes. All right, so I got one last piece to do. I'm going to pull this back out, because I want to trim now this rubber piece to shape and get it glued to this bottom piece, because that's the way the original was, and then we're ready to go. I'm actually going to take this now all the way out so I can finish working on this tub, and I'll get it put on a shelf. Project was relatively easy. It's definitely worth refreshing, getting your new heater core in there, and definitely upgrading your motor. Project relatively simple. Probably the hardest thing was to cut the larger hole in the firewall, only because it's just an awkward position and that type of stuff. So I hope you enjoyed following along. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a little thumbs up. If you like to see more about my whole project, this is restoring this 1979 Jeep CJ7. You can look at YouTube and just search under Project Rowdy. Currently this is probably the 27th video, I believe. Hope you decide to follow along, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
Jack it up.